Hello, today we'll be taking a look at loops. I think I might have gotten myself stuck in one. Help me! Loops are commonly used if you want to perform the same action multiple times. The two loops that we're going to be looking at today is called the for loop and the while loop. In the for loop, you create a temporary variable, you set it equal to value, and that's the first argument. The secondary argument is whether or not your temporary variable has some sort of relation to another number, another value, right? And the third one, as I've shown here, is just incrementing a every time. In the first iteration of the for loop, the temporary variable will be set to the value that you specified up here. In this case, we are incrementing a by 1 every time that we go through the loop, which means that the first time we go through the loop, a is going to be equal to 1. But the second time, a is going to be equal to 2. And then 3. And then 4. And then 5. Oh, but hang on. Now it's equal to 10. So it can't do this because this condition isn't met. So that's for loops. Let's take a look at while loops. A while loop is very simple. Basically, if a condition is true, it'll do stuff. As long as that condition is true, it'll keep doing that until the condition is somehow set to false. I'll create two new functions in my program here, a public void loop and a not loop. I'm not going to expand them yet. Let's go ahead and run loop. We can see that it prints out all the numbers from 1 to 99. Let's go ahead and run not loop. And they both print out the numbers 1 to 99. Now you might think, hold on, these two functions does exactly the same, and they do. However, if I expand this not loop function, this becomes very messy very quickly. As you can see, these are 200 lines of code, approximately 200 lines of code, just for doing what we can do with a for loop instead. So I'm going to collapse this not loop function. We're just going to be ignoring that for the rest of this episode. We're going to look at this loop function right here. I'm using a for loop and I'm setting a temporary integer variable n to be equal to 1. This is our starting value. This will only be read, so this line of code, as it were, will only be read at the beginning of the for loop. And then at the beginning of every single stage, it checks if n is less than 100. If that condition is met, it'll do whatever's in here. And when this code is executed, all of the code inside the loop is executed, it'll increment n by 1. That's what this n++ is. It's basically saying n equals n plus 1. So if we go ahead and run the loop function again, I can prove my point that it prints out the numbers 1 to 99. Notice how it doesn't print out 100. That's because in a for loop, if this value hits 100, it'll check this guy, and 100 isn't less than 100, so then it's going to say, hey, this condition is false, so I'm not going to run the code. That's why it's not printing out 100. I could put a less than and an equal sign next to this. So this is basically saying, hey, if n is less than or equal to 100, print it out. So now I'll print out 100 as well. And it does. So here I've constructed a while loop. This does basically the exact same thing. However, in a while loop, you need to have a pre-assigned value. So my pre-assigned value is the same as it was before. So int n is equal to 1. I'm assigning that at the very beginning. And then I was saying, hey, while n is less than 100, so while this condition is true, it's just going to loop through these lines of code. So we can go ahead and run that and make sure that actually does what it's supposed to, and it does. Here's another example of a loop that is not often used. This is a do while loop. Basically, it's the same as the while loop in this example, but this basically says do and then this while this condition is true. So you could do a lot with loops. Here I've written a simple algorithm that takes all the numbers between 1 and 1000, not including 1000 but including 1, and it checks if the number is a multiple of 3 or a multiple of 5. If it is, then it'll just add that to a running sum, and if not, it'll just log the number to the console. At the end here, we can go console.writeLine and the sum, so we can see what the sum of all multiples of 3 and 5 within this range is. And we're getting a lot. So I'll move this outside of the for loop. That's a bit of a mistake on my part. And now we should see the numbers incrementing and we get the correct answer, 2, 3, 3, 1, 6, 8. So that concludes part 4 of our programming basics. So that concludes part 4 of our programming basics tutorial series. I hope you learned something. Please give me a like, subscribe to the channel, comment down below if you have any questions, anything of that sort. I'll try to help you as best as I can. Until next time, happy coding!